What's going on, everybody? To all the young entrepreneurs and young hustlers who are trying to improve their businesses as well as their personal life, I'm bringing you back with another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast with my new friend, Morgan Anderson. She is about to become my neighbor, kind of. She will live up the road on the freeway from me. It'll be about an hour drive, but we consider that a neighbor from where she's at currently. She's moving to the great state of Utah here in just a couple of weeks. She was just mentioning some of her moving hassles that she's had recently. Super excited to have more podcasters out here in the state of Utah. I feel like there's not a ton of us, and if they are, it's always interesting podcast to say the least. So, Morgan, thank you for joining us. We're excited to hear from you. As mentioned, Morgan is going to be sharing some insights on taxes. A lot of you young entrepreneurs out there, we understand the joys and the pleasures of starting a business, working for ourselves, but there's a lot of legality that comes behind that, and taxes are the big one. So she's going to be sharing some expert opinions on taxes and how we can always do the right thing when it comes to auditing and making sure our business is in place the correct way. So with that all being said, let's jump into today's episode. Morgan, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are a nerd with taxes.
I know when people say, "What are you passionate about?" and I say taxes, they always kind of look at me with eyebrows raised like, "Are you sane? Like, how did this happen?" But honestly, I've always loved numbers. I've always loved law. I've always loved helping people where they feel like there's this void, right, of what their knowledge is and what feels right to them and what their area of specialty is. And I love filling that void for them. So I happened into the tax world by pure happenstance. I call it a happy accident. I answered an ad in the local paper for an administrative assistant and fell into a company that dealt with tax debt and found my passion. I've been doing it for 24 and a half years, almost 25 years. Hard to believe because I only look 30. But I love what I do. I get to help people when they're at a point of, I'm losing sleep at night. I don't know what to do. And a lot of it are newer entrepreneurs. In the first 5 years of their business, they a lot of times have this passion for what they're selling or what they're creating or what their service is, but they don't know the administrative side. They don't know how to best manage the financial aspect of the business. They don't know where to turn to figure out what tax obligations they have. And before you know it, they're up and running and they're starting to make money, not realizing that the tax is a component that is going to hurt them if they don't stay on top of it. It's just as a solopreneur or a new business owner, you have so much going on that you're trying to stay on top of. I know most of us who have our own businesses, it's not Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, right? It's Monday through Sunday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., sometimes later. We don't get a vacation, we don't get downtime. And to add onto your plate the taxes, it's a component that seriously will make or break you in the long run. So I want to be able to come on here and just say, as a new business owner, here's where you need to make sure you carve out a little bit of time each week to pay attention to it and manage it so it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more into that. So obviously, you're the expert on this entire situation. As
Yeah.
people start their business, you go in with a very naive sense of, I'm going to start. Either you get a product or a service or something along those lines. You say,
Right.
I like what I'm doing. I like this product or service, and I'm going to give it to other people and assume they like it as well. But then you come with the harsh realities that it's very hard to sell, incredibly hard to market. It's hard to manage your teams. It's hard to manage all your operations. Then on top of it, you have the government who's going to be breathing down your neck in a couple months again. It seems like tax season, if maybe for you, it feels like this even more so because it goes from boom, tax season. All right, a little
Yeah.
dip. All right, so. And for all the young business owners out there, that is a huge issue that they don't even really reflect on until it
Mhm.
actually comes time. I have a friend dealing with this right now with his business. He was very late to get all of his tax information filed correctly, sent it into his accountant a little bit too late. The accountant basically said, "Look, you sent it in really late. I'll file for an extension." But then my friend, even though the accountant filed for an extension, didn't realize you still had upfront costs, and he went through this entire process, and he's still going through the process right now just because he didn't have those operations already set in place.
Right.
So, for young businesses out there, Morgan, what do we need to do to make sure we have everything set up correctly?
Great question. And this is going because your finances are the guiding point of your business, right?
Mm,
Like they really determine what kind of cash flow you have available to invest in a new marketing strategy or to add another employee, or unfortunately, sometimes it's make decisions to let go of employees or stop focusing in areas that maybe aren't as profitable. Your finances are the true guiding point of your business. So, making sure that those from week to week are spot on is one of the most important things you can do. I always recommend when I hear somebody's going into business, first thing before you start operating, I want you to find a good CPA that you can work with, somebody that you can meet with at least on a quarterly basis and say, okay, what am I looking like right now? Where am I percentage wise on my spending? Is there an area where I should pull back? What do I need to do for personal income tax? Are we tending to our payroll taxes or any sales taxes the proper way? I mean, you really want to think about your CPA as one of the strongest advisors on your business's board.
mhm,
Okay. Think of them as, to put it in a Catholic term, think of them as a priest, right? You confess everything to them because the more they understand about what you're doing financially with your business, the better they can guide you. I'm telling you, a lot of people will say, well, I don't have the money to invest in a relationship with a CPA. I'm just going to plan to self file my taxes every year and I'll just do QuickBooks on my own. You will cost yourself in more money, in more penalties, more interest on tax that you're going to end up owing than the cost of an investment into a good CPA partner.
I
I
agree.
You just will. Your CPA, if you align yourself with a good one, they're going to be able to help you anticipate pitfalls financially that your business is heading towards and cut it off at the pass and save you money. So that's one of the first big things I would say is make sure and align yourself with that partner CPA and have a monthly meeting with them, have a quarterly meeting with them, whatever your finances will allow, but don't break it out further than quarterly. You want to be able to sit down with them and make sure that you are spot on with all of your obligations.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you bring to these meetings.
Sure.
Say, say a brand new business, you just got started, especially once again, my show's for a lot of these young entrepreneurs out there. You
Mhm.
just registered your business, you have some of your operations going, you start making a couple sales, things are heading in the right direction. What are the things you need to track both on the weekly basis to ensure you have all the proper material to show to the CPA later? And what do you actually bring to these quarterly meetings to say, all right, this is everything we got. Tell us what to do.
Great question. So first things first, for any business owner, any operator, sole proprietor, I recommend you always have QuickBooks going. Okay, QuickBooks is a basic bookkeeping program that will allow you link it to your credit cards, you link it to your bank accounts, and it allows you to categorize everything.
Hmm. I'm sure
So
everyone's seen those commercials when they're watching the sporting event on TV, baseball, football, basketball, whatever. I always get those Intuit QuickBooks commercials.
oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody in the industry calls it QBO, QuickBooks Online.
Nice.
Any CPA, bookkeeper, accountant you work with is going to be able to be authorized to access that. They won't be authorized to change things. You can limit authorizations on there.
Mm.
but you want them to be able to look at it and come up with a game plan with what they're seeing. Income, expenses, where are you spending your money? Why are you spending your money that way? Is it a good investment? So either you want to bring your bank account statements and your credit card statements, or you want to give them access to it so you can sit down and talk about it together. If you're still in the fact finding, in the relationship testing phase, don't give them authorization to your stuff just
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
Definitely just bring the statements with you. Make sure they understand what your business is. Because if they're just looking at numbers and they don't understand what your business is, what services you provide, or what products you sell, or where you want to head in the coming 6 months, year, 3 years, their ability to guide you effectively is going to be very limited. So talk about everything. And if they don't show an interest in that, it's probably the wrong person. Yeah. And I would think about yourself too. Like, do you react better to somebody who's more older, kind of in an authoritative position, or role? Do you react better with female or men? Do you react with better with somebody who's younger? Really think
Mhm.
about what you're comfortable working with, and then go to your local chamber of commerce. Ask them, who do you have in the chamber who's an accountant or CPA, and then start calling them. That's always a really good place to start if you don't know. If you know other business owners and you see that they're successful, ask them for their referrals. Ask them for who they use. It's very important that you find somebody that works well with you and
Mm.
your unique ways of running your business and your unique ideas.
Definitely. What are some things that we should be looking for when it comes to finding our ideal CPA? You mentioned the demographics, make sure it's somebody who you could work with, or
Mhm.
maybe it's a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger, but specifically going into the professional side. Because I feel like anyone, when they're working with somebody new, you can get kind of the sense of the social side where you're like, okay, do we click? Will you understand me? Will you understand my business? Good. We could take it
Sure.
that far. But going into the nitty gritty of it, what are we looking for? Because there's accountants you could pay on retainer for thousands and thousands and
Oh,
thousands of dollars a
yeah,
month. There's accountants that you can get for $50 a session. Like, and obviously there's the in between on all of that. Is it just a stage of what your business is at? Is it certain aspects you should look on some of the other clientele they've taken on, how big their practice is? What are the nitty-gritty details? Because anyone could put on the face and make it seem like they would be the perfect fit for you. But
sure.
how can you as the business make sure it would be the right fit?
Well, with a newer business, obviously cost is a massive factor,
Mhm.
right? If somebody's going to charge you a consultation fee to just sit down and meet with you and take a brief look at your documents and talk about what your goals are, what you want to do, what kind of relationship you're looking for, if they charge you for that, odds are they're not the right fit,
Mm.
because you want to find somebody who wants to invest in you as well in the beginning. And if they're just looking at making a buck, it's probably not a good person who's going to be altruistic with you. Now, I'm not saying for when they dig into your records, if they want to look at your QBO, your QuickBooks Online, and see, are you categorizing things correctly? Are they going to have to do a lot of cleanup work? That costs money, right? Like, that costs time. But if it's just meeting with you to make an initial assessment, you bring your bank statements and you bring a print off of your QBO and you say, hey, I just want to meet with you and talk to you about what are your availability? What are the
Mhm.
hours you work? Have you helped other entrepreneurs with their business in the beginning stages? Are you familiar with my state's taxation laws?
Mm.
Because now in this day and age, you can be operating in California and have an accountant in New York, because everything is online portals and everything else. It's really, who are you comfortable with? But you want to make sure whoever it is, like, let's say you're in manufacturing, you're manufacturing a widget. You want to make sure that the person you're working with has a solid understanding of all tax obligations you're going to be having. If you're selling them to 5 local states, you want to make sure they know that for all 5 of those local states, they know what your sales tax obligations are. Because if not, you're going to end up having a tax hiccup.
Mm.
Online sales have been phenomenal for increasing volume for sales. But when you start looking at the tax obligations of selling to all of these different markets, you end up with taxes on the other end. So you just want to make sure and really ask questions from 10 different angles to them. No question is silly when you're looking for a new accountant to work with. Don't be embarrassed to ask questions. Don't be embarrassed that a question may seem too small for a professional to field. Nothing is too small when you're talking about your money and trying to find somebody that you can work with to efficiently and adequately manage it.
Well, and I think the caveat to that too is if it does seem too small for them, they probably wouldn't be that right fit that we've
Yeah,
been talking about. If they think, okay, you don't know that answer, okay, I don't, so I'm going to choose somebody who will actually teach that to me and recognize
right,
where I'm at in the stage of the business.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Morgan, question for you: have you read the
Mhm.
book Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Years ago.
Okay,
Years
so
ago. Yeah.
basic framework for anyone who hasn't read it, and as a little refresher, inside the book, Robert Kiyosaki, he speaks about different tax strategies and the traditional means of why a lot of business owners, they find their ways to pay taxes last and make sure they can pay themselves, their employees, and make sure they get everything in the business side done first. And so there's different tax strategies that they use in
Mhm.
order to do that. Tell us a little bit about what are the perks of owning our own businesses? How can we use taxes to our advantage rather than our disadvantage? You see so many people struggling these days trying to make ends meet, and then they pay half of it away to the government or more so than half. What are some of these tax
Yeah.
strategies we could be looking for as young business owners?
So first things first, know what you can write off. And on the other hand, almost as importantly, what you can't.
Mm,
And the reason I bring that up is because in my world where I deal with tax debt, I deal with a lot of assessed taxes from tax returns that were filed. The IRS or the state goes in and audits and says, wait a minute, you can't claim that as an expense. And they remove it, leaving a tax consequence. So it's so important, again, working with a great CPA, accountant, bookkeeper, that you know what the limitations are. I've seen some people try to claim some pretty exorbitant things, right? Like I had a couple who would pay their children to shred paperwork, and their office was in their home, right? And the kids were like 8 and 10, and they
nice.
paid them like $15 to $20 an hour for their kids to shred paperwork. And it was like, okay, come on. These are little kids. First of all, there's labor laws, right? Like we've got to keep that in mind. But it was a way for them to, the way the IRS determined it when they watched the flow of money, they would put the money into the kids' bank accounts and then pop it right back into their personal.
Mm,
So if something seems a little extreme, or if you're trying really hard to put a square peg in a round hole, know that it's probably something you shouldn't be doing. At the same time, too, keep in mind what you can be writing off. As a business owner, how much do you use your personal cell phone for your business? How much do you use your personal vehicle to get from point A to point B for your business? Make sure, again, working with a good sound accountant, that they're guiding you through how to adequately document these expenses and make sure that you're writing off everything you can. Your home office, right? If you have a 1,500 square foot place And 500 square foot is just dedicated to storing your supplies or your inventory and your desk and your computer and your phone. And that's all you do in that 500 square feet. That is a third of all of your household expenses that you can legitimately write off.
Hmm.
So again, going back to the recommendation of finding a good CPA accountant who can walk you through everything that you can legitimately claim is going to be worth its weight in gold as you're developing and building your business.
So let's talk a little bit more about specific differences between the write-offs versus the not write-offs. Obviously, it'll come for a case by case issue, and that's why you should talk to your CPA on those exact cases. For
Mhm.
instance, one of the ones you brought up that I use inside of my business, I travel to our office space, and it takes a lot in gas and a ton of miles on my car. So that's a massive write-off I use inside of my business. But for other people, if they're working at home, that might be a little bit harder to claim if they're not really driving anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are some for a lot of these young businesses out there, what are some basic principles or basic concepts of write-offs versus things you shouldn't write off? You've already talked about a couple of them, but maybe you can fire
Yeah.
off a few more.
I wish I could give you some more pointed direction on it, but honestly, the write-offs and the capabilities to take items away from what ends up being taxable income is so catered to the business that you're running. It really is. Um, every time you ship stuff out, make sure it's something that you're keeping track of and you list it as an expense. Utilities, all of everything that goes to the home office. I'm trying to think of what else. I've had pushback on vehicle expenses where the mileage log is not kept detailed enough.
Mm,
That's a really big one. Like you need to make sure you have the date, the addresses to and from, a summary of how many miles and what it was for. And some mileage logs go so far as to say what your starting mileage was and what your ending mileage was on each trip. There are apps for it now where you can press a button and like, okay, I'm driving for work, and you can type in what it's for, and it'll keep track of that for you. I'm trying to think. Be careful with clothing, uniforms. If you are doing something where, like, let's say if you are an electrician, right? That is what you do. You're self-employed and you have your contact information on the side of your vehicle and you wear a uniform shirt all the time. Like you can write that off. If you try to say, hey, I'm a professional, like let's say it's an accountant and I have a wardrobe that I wear to meet clients and it doesn't have the name of your company on it or your name or anything, and you try saying, well, the cost of that clothing and the dry cleaning for that clothing, they're going to say no.
yeah.
Because you could wear that
Yeah.
anywhere, right? But if it has like the electrical company's name and information, it has your name. So when you show up to a client's home, they can identify you as the person you say you are who's showing up. You can claim the cost of that clothing as well as any cleaning that you have to do for it. For your vehicle, like for me, I'm in the tax world, right? If I put the name of my business on the side of my car, I could not write off the monthly payment or anything else. I can only claim the mileage that I actually drive for, like going to our PO box and
Mm.
coming back, going to a conference and coming back. But I don't do enough. Like my business is not dependent on people identifying me. Like, so I'm not going to be driving down the road and somebody's going to be like, oh, tax debt solutions, I should call them. Like, it just doesn't happen. It's not needed for my business. So it's not something that I could write off.
Mm.
And this is where I say, again, getting a good CPA who can put you within those boundaries and say, yes, you can do this for your specific business, or no, you can't. It's, again, worth its weight in gold.
I guess as we're coming up on the final few minutes here, the Get Over Yourself podcast, a big piece of advice that you've shared, one of the main concepts that you shared this entire episode, is keeping track of
Mhm.
everything inside of your business. And like you mentioned at the beginning, that is very difficult when you have 1,000 things going on,
I know.
especially for these startups. You have new issues that arise every day with your clients, with trying to find new clients, with your operations. Everything is just boom, 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 24/7. Is there any piece of software or some kind of good tracking method that you have seen or your clients have used in the past that makes it a little bit simpler for everyone who's just getting started out there today?
Again, QBO, QuickBooks Online, very important. There are some receipt scanning apps that you can use. You can just scan the receipt and save it to yourself. Some of them link to QBO, so when it sees the credit card charge and the receipt, it'll match them up.
Mm.
Um, I have had a lot of clients who are more blue collar who are like, yeah, I keep a stack of receipts in my truck, and for them, it's like, okay, make a weekly habit of every Saturday morning, you go out to your truck and you grab that stack of receipts and you sit down and scan them in, right? Like it's one of those self-discipline things where you should not go more than 1 week without reconciling your records. And I know it's so easy to say, right?
No,
But
it's
as
not easy. It's easy
I
to
mean,
say, but I'm laughing at myself because I was that guy who I had literally a Ziploc folder of probably over 100 receipts. And I
yeah,
walked in one day with my accountant. I said, I have all these. And he just started laughing. He said, good luck, buddy.
yeah.
Oh, I had that exact same issue. I know what you're talking about. You're preaching to the right audience here.
Yeah, so it's a matter if you are so passionate about what you're doing, don't self-sabotage by not
Mm,
paying attention to the details because it doesn't matter how hard you work in one direction. If you're not buckling down and paying attention to the I's being dotted and the T's being crossed of your records, you're automatically setting yourself up to fail, right? I don't care if you put a reminder on your phone, if you put a reminder on your computer, if you block off an hour every week on your schedule to tend to the paperwork, you are going to be light years ahead of most people who go into business for themselves.
definitely.
Yeah, so self-discipline.
Self discipline. Wow. Who would have
Mhm.
thought that connecting back to the get over yourself concept was possible with taxes? I love it.
And
Well, awesome.
if you get nasty notes from the IRS or the state about a tax consequence from what any missteps you had had before or lack of funding, don't hide from them.
Hmm,
That is a huge thing. That's the corner of the tax world that I'm from and dealing with tax debt. Don't hide from them. There is always a solution. You just need to open them up and say, okay, I need help or I need to deal with this. And don't let it rest because they charge more penalties and more interest every day that debt is sitting there.
definitely.
Yeah.
And all the young entrepreneurs out there, my final piece of advice in this entire subject is make sure you're also checking your mail a lot. The amount of penalties I've had to pay because I
Mhm.
don't check my mail enough is ridiculous. So, Ron, everyone, I know. That's why you're on here correcting my mistakes. That's why you're here. Everyone, if you enjoyed listening to Morgan today, you can also find her on social media as well as her other platforms. Morgan, give us a little cue into that.
Yeah, goldenliontaxsolutions.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn, Morgan Q. Anderson, EA. Look me up, reach out to me. If you ever have questions, I am happy to share my knowledge and expertise with you and give you some guidance on what to do.
That's perfect. Thank you, Morgan. For everyone who listened today, if you benefited from hearing today's words, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Also, if you know a friend who is in business, struggling with their taxes, struggling with anything that they have to give to the government very soon, or they don't want to give as much to the government, maybe you should listen and refer this episode to them. Guys, with that all being said, I appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.